Welcome back to the parillaworks channel. My name is John. This is the latest Squiggle project from parillaworks. So this is going to be a simple one, a small one, doesn't require a lot of lumber. I'm using some leftover white oak I have from some past projects. And this project just requires some thin strips, so I'm going to get everything planed down to 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to rip it down here to about 2.5 inches or so, which is a little bit wider than my template will require, so I have a little bit of wiggle room when rough cutting. At the crosscut sled, I can get the pieces cut down to length, then I can glue them together. This isn't the strongest joint, but it doesn't need to be because I'll be alternating the pieces to create a faux box joint. There will be plenty of strength once the pieces are stacked and glued together. With the glue dry, I give the pieces a few passes through the drum sander to smooth out all the surfaces. Next, I can trace my template onto my first piece. I also lightly mark for the registration holes before drilling them out at the drill press. After that, I can cut up to my line at the bandsaw. I'm using a 3/16 inch blade for this, which makes it pretty easy to get in and around these curves. We'll see later on that using a Sharpie was a big hindrance, but I do like using it because it provides a thick line as a buffer to cut against. Next, I can secure the template to my workpiece with some double-sided tape. And I'm also going to use some dowels to plug into those registration holes so that everything lines up perfectly. I'll have these templates available for sale on my site. There'll be a link in the description below. There's multiple holes so that you can make these bookends in various sizes. And here's the first of many flush trimming operations for this project. You can see that I entered this cut pretty safely with the bearing and template, but then I sort of pull away and the piece kicks. I think it caught a little bit of uphill end grain there. I think that I thought my push block was going to hit the router bit, so I pulled away a little bit, which meant the workpiece wasn't stable and firm against the router bit, and the bit just kicked it away. So you just got to make sure you're using a push block or keeping your hands at a safe distance from the bit. And you just got to kind of be confident with this routing and make sure you have a firm grip on your workpiece. There's a lot of flush trimming for this project. I would say that this router table was a little bit too small for this size project. Right when you get to the ends of either side of it, it starts to hang off the router table, and you have to be careful that it doesn't tip and gouge into your workpiece. So this will be my first piece for one of the bookends, and I'll sort of work my way from the middle out. So I need to go back to the bandsaw and rough cut a few more pieces out, and then I can glue them together for my first stack. Next, I can glue these pieces together. I try not to use too much glue here because any squeeze out will have to fully dry before being cut by the router, just so it doesn't gum up the bit. I also use a few dowels for registration here so that the pieces line up perfectly, and I have some overlap on every edge. Once the glue dries, I can use the middle pieces as my new template to route against. This is a bit repetitive and requires a little bit of focus so that you don't gouge into your piece. When that happens, the mistake will be translated into subsequent layers as the next piece becomes your new template. So just take your time and hopefully it doesn't happen. Alright, so this is more of the same, except I ended up making this the last layer. I ran this by my wife because this was for our house, and we decided to stop it at 5 total layers. I was going to do 7 initially, but we figured out that 5 was going to be enough depth for this to work out. So for these ones, I didn't drill the holes all the way through the workpiece, just enough so that the dowels could fit. So now it's more of the same of gluing and clamping these pieces together, letting them dry, and then heading back to the router table. Now as the workpiece gets taller, it's going to have a propensity to tip over as you apply pressure to the router bit. So you just have to be careful that you apply your pressure evenly and don't tip the piece one way or the other. Now this being an L-shaped object, it's going to have a little bit more support than a straight line one, but it still can tip over, so be careful with that. Onto the sanding. These Squiggle projects always have a ton of sanding, and this one was no exception. I got this cheap spindle sander for the ring box I made last year, and it's just okay. You know, not the best, but it works well enough for now. I eventually moved to my orbital sander as well as a lot of hand sanding, and this is when I realized that I couldn't sand away some of the Sharpie. The white oak absorbed it so far into the end grain pores that it wasn't really possible to sand away. I tried, but I realized that the more I sanded, it was going to sort of alter the shape of the squiggles, and I really didn't want that to happen, so you'll see later on that I ended up dyeing this thing black, so sorry about that. Because the squiggle is 3/4 of an inch thick, I used a 3/8 inch radius roundover to apply a roundover to all of the edges. Over at the crosscut sled, I can get these pieces cut to their final lengths, and I just have a stop block so that both of these bookends are identical. Because of those Sharpie lines that I mentioned earlier, I decided to paint it black. So I have the Rubio Monocoat Precolor Easy, and this first layer here is going to act like a dye, where it's going to color the surface level grain of this white oak, and I'll let that dry, and then I'll come back with the actual Rubio Monocoat oil, which will act more like the stain as far as the color is concerned, where it'll kind of get deep into those pores, and it'll also add the protection that the normal oil would add. I have this left over from the 80 drawer apothecary chest that I did last year, so I figured let's put it to use before it goes bad. Alright, that's it for this one. This was a quick project that I've had in my head for a little while, so I was glad I could dedicate some time to it. I was a little bummed I had to dye these black, but I think they ended up looking pretty sleek, so let me know what you guys think. Like I mentioned, I'll have these templates available on my website. There'll be a link in the description below. Until next time, thank you guys for watching.